Lively. If you haven't read Demented, God knows it's lively. It's got plenty to say about what it is to be a diva and the opera scene generally. In fact, the most fascinating, the most intellectually stimulating, the most provocative opera book of our time, Demented, an explanation of nothing less than the ontology of diva. The exasperating thing is that now that he is about to address you, America's most devoted opera audience, Demented is no longer available. ETHAN MORDDEN, why is that?
It's just one of those publishing things. The house underprinted, and all the copies are exhausted. Book did nicely, but I don't think we're going to go back to press.
When was Demented first published?
It came out in September last year.
Uh-huh. Why the title Demented? An opera queen named Undine after the water sprite is said to be demented, but divas?
Yeah, I think some of them are. It really depends on the diva herself. Some are very placid and some are quite wild. But I didn't mean the term demented so much to describe how I feel a great or not great diva is, but I'm quoting standard opera terminology. The buffs often speak of demented, meaning a great performance. That's their idea, not necessarily mine.
Gee, I guess I'm a buff. The term is new to me in that context, though I certainly have heard certain buffs call one another demented, maybe not without reason. Also, filth, the opposite of demented.
That's the opposite. But the idea is that a lot of times you'll say to someone about a performance that you missed, how was it? And the person will say, demented, meaning it was a great performance. They don't mean that the actors chewed the scenery or that the theater fell apart or that there was a riot. What they mean is everyone was going for it. There was great acting, there was great singing, it was a night of great music theater. Similarly, filth does not mean what filth normally means. It means the performance was not good. It usually means boring, oddly enough. But opera buffs don't say boring, they don't say dull, they don't say miscast, they say filth.
Well, again, I've heard opera buffs, I've heard standees call one another filth, by which typically they've meant that the person being filth patronized backroom bars.
Oh, boy. Well, that's another use of the word filth, actually. But, of course, I don't mean that every opera buff alive, or even maybe most of them, uses these terms. But when I first took up opera in, I guess it was the very late 60s, early 70s, at the Met, that filth and demented did tend to be standard terminology. That's what I kept hearing.
Were you a standee?
When I first began, yes, I was sometimes. But I don't really enjoy standing as much as I do sitting. So not often, no. But I know those people. I know them well.
Well, a commentary on them and their argot. What's a diva?
A diva really is a woman who sings opera.
Uh-huh.
Just as a divo is a man who sings opera, but you notice we don't really use the term divo very often.
Well, among other things, Ethan, when I say he's ontologically interesting, he's invented his own terms, he's stipulated definitions for them, not formally as a logician might, but nevertheless, he's got a very interesting vocabulary that I think facilitates drawing some important distinctions. Stimmdiva, Kunstdiva, what are they?
Okay. Stimm is German for voice. Kunst is German for art. Stimmdiva is a woman whose primary attraction is beauty of voice, beauty of singing. It might be a facility in coloratura, but it most frequently it refers to someone who's not necessarily the most stimulating actress or interpreter of characters, but definitely a gorgeous sound. And by the opposite token, a Kunstdiva might not have the most beautiful voice on earth, but in terms of interpretation and characterization and phrasing, unique.
I'm in the middle of harvesting copy for my forthcoming series of publications, Opera Fanatic, and I play records for the listeners to review. For example, a few weeks ago, I played a Verdi Puccini aria recital album sung by Kiri Takanawa. The listeners tore her to pieces, mostly, acknowledging in passing that her sound is lovely. For them, Kunst is all. I'm talking about the preponderance of the listeners, at any rate, the preponderance of the callers.
Yeah.
Now, Callas won our bandezza over poignancy and vulnerability. You're a sucker for imposing, and you dismiss buffo. You call a role such as Susanna part of opera's least interesting Fach. Why?
Yeah, the little sister parts, I call them,
Yeah.
Gretel, too. It's not really that I don't respect those roles or the writing of them. It's that, as far as I can see, you do not become famous singing Gretel or even Susanna. You become famous singing Norma, Tosca. You become famous singing the mad lady parts, which is why I think so many lyrics tend to try to turn themselves into spintos or even dramatics, because there really isn't that much future in basing an entire repertory on, say, the roles that Graziella Sciuti sang.
Well, you say, for example, quotes, it is when we gain the bigger, darker voices that we reach true diva Kunst. What of Maria Farnetti, Sayao, Albanese?
Yes, that's a good point. Yes, Sayao did. She fielded one of the smallest voices there was, and I'll be the first to say that, for example, that famous relay from the Met of Manon with Sayao and Beecham is not only an extraordinary performance, but the duet that the two of them come up with. I mean, Beecham and Sayao in the Saint-Sulpice, N'est-ce plus ma main, where his accompanying and leading and following of her and her performance is one of the most extraordinary things I know of on pirate disc. So I guess, I don't remember the context in which that was said. I certainly don't mean to say that we are not interested in a singer like Sayao or Farnetti, as you say. Although I think Farnetti fielded a much larger voice than Sayao. I never thought of her as her lyric, and she recorded a lot of verismo arias. I don't know if she actually sang them on stage. Everyone records those, but in any case, I just think that it's difficult for a soprano to, as you say, impose strong feelings upon us, unless they do tackle those big parts. Now, it doesn't have to be Norma, it doesn't have to be Tosca, but it's got to be one of those demented roles. It can't be a little sister career.
The public that uses words such as demented and filth certainly seems to be interested in divas of sweep and command.
Yeah.
But what of charm? What of delicacy, tenderness?
Well, not to put those down, but when you start thinking of opera's great roles, Norma, Isolde, and so on, there's just not much. There's tenderness, there's subtlety, but there's not that much charm. Sayao's a good example because there was a very charming singer, and certainly her Manon was not short in charm. And any Manon who is short in charm is going to have, big problems. That's a multifaceted role, but charm is perhaps the salient. However, I'm not saying, in other words, that those roles don't count. I'm saying that it's best, if you want to become truly famous and one of the greats, to expand your repertory to include a few tigresses.
What about Butterfly?
I think that's a perfect example. That is one of the most demented roles there is.
And yet in the first act, the singer has to be exquisitely, ethereally tender.
I think that's one of the great challenges, and I think that's why that's another multifaceted role, and why a lot of singers are, although wonderful in the part, not truly unique, not extraordinary. It calls for it's like Violette. It's sort of the Violetta of the Puccini Verismo years. It's got a lot more in it than a lot of people might at first think. It's a very, very fully drawn part. It's not just a matter of the fact that when she gets on stage, she pretty much holds it for the rest of the evening.
My own feeling, which stems more from my own perusal of the score than from anything that one might hear generally, is that Amina is Bellini's Butterfly. That may seem like an overstatement somehow. You don't think of Amina as having the intensity of suffering of Butterfly.
No.
Yet I feel that it's there, and I feel that it should be classified as a great role.
Oh, I agree. I think that's one of the most underrated operas. But one problem with La Sonnambula is that as a semi-seria piece, it's that bizarre hybrid genre that was very popular for a while in the early Romantic era, but which a lot of modern people, particularly the opinion makers, the Jerko critics, can't seem to handle. They don't understand why the piece seems so serious and yet is essentially comic and has a happy ending. They don't understand that operas aren't either The Barber of Seville or Tristan and Isolde. There's this odd genre that, and there aren't too many operas that are done anymore that are like this. Another one is Linda de Chamonix, which is even less popular. But if you remember when Sonnambula was first given at the Met, in at least in recent times, when Sutherland
early 60s,
all the critics went out of their way to put down. I must admit, the production helped them because it was a silly one, but they all went out of their way to put down this opera, and it's not because, well, you have to hear Collis in it to realize how intense it is. Sutherland was quite wonderful in the part, really quite wonderful. I don't think, again, I think Collis taught us that there's more depth of feeling in that role than just anyone can come forth and portray. But when you have Collis, when you hear Collis in that part, you say, this is an immensely beautiful and affecting and delightful and winning work. And again, it's not an opera that most people class in the first category, and I disagree with them entirely. I think right after Norma.
Sonnambula is perhaps the only surviving example, unless you count Paisiello's Nina or Linda de Chamonix, of opera semi-seria, so-called mixed genre opera larmoyante, opera depicting the lives of rustics, of petty, of middle-class types.
In fact, basically what it is a comedy, like L'Elisir d'Amore, that is not played for fun, but instead is played for sentiment.
The reason why is the high notes, that last name Heinotz, who ostensibly wrote a handbook for divas on which you purport to rely. Now, I only got to Demented this week, but I have friends who had read it, and they don't speak German, and as the Times pointed out, you have to say, for many of us, you have to say the name Lotte Heinotz aloud in order to get what's going on. They took it for granted, as does some of your publicists or some of your publishers' press material, that there really was a Lotte Heinotz.
You know, the odd thing is, a lot of people made that mistake. I guess maybe it's because they don't speak German. You're right. If you just read it and you don't pronounce it properly, you'll get lost. I thought everyone who read this book would be at least somewhat knowledgeable in opera and would read the name out and hear a lot of high notes and get the joke and just realize that I decided to bring in an imaginary guest who would more or less play devil's advocate. A lot of times I don't agree with high notes. I'm putting in other words, it gave me a chance to express opinions that I don't necessarily hold myself, just to make the book that much richer. And also I thought to have a little fun, because I have invented this character who has written the Prima Donna's Handbook, and she's got all these incredible advices on how to get ahead and how to push the tenor back and what roles to pick. And yet, as the book progresses, we realize that, in fact, this poor woman was nothing but a compromaria herself, and not even a good one, the kind who only got to sing lead roles during medical emergencies when everyone else was, out with the flu. And I think there's something in the book about, at one point, when she did go on for an ailing diva, a crowd of enraged music lovers at the end of the performance attempted to attack her as she was leaving the theater, and she finally was asked to retire by the city of Vienna. She sang in Vienna in about 1910s, 1920s, and I thought this would just be an amusing extra little thing to throw into the book, and that no one would be fooled. But the odd thing is, a lot of Jerko reviewers, which is a tautology, all reviewers are Jerkos, and a lot of readers, it turns out, just completely fell for it.
Yeah. Now, my own feeling is that in introducing her, you got carried away by the brilliance of your style. Even more than style is like no one else's. Not only does he invent his own terminology, and it's a very useful thing, but the style has a sass, a flair, a bite that sweeps one away. It's a heady book to read. For me, high notes didn't work. the style worked. The style intoxicated me. Anyway, you can't buy Demented now, which is anecdotes. Oxford University Press, its publisher, sent a copy here to KCR, which was immediately for me in order to do jacket copy. But somebody immediately made off with it, hence no jacket copy by me.
It's a very popular author.
Yeah, and it's a kind of compliment, I suppose, to the book Opera Anecdotes. It's just come out. Is it in the stores yet?
Yeah, it's now out.
And I'm also looking at a book I didn't know was in the offing. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Tales from Gay Manhattan. Well, let's see. Kansas. Dorothy came from Kansas. Is it
Well, don't you? You can see by the cover of the book that it's the Emerald City of New York. See the halo around it? That's the idea.
So it's a...
New York is a kind of Oz.
Uh-huh.
Is the impression you're supposed to get.
Ethan Mordden, among many, many things, worked for Opera News. Now he's an editor of Christopher Street. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore, somehow connected to Christopher Street.
Yeah, I have a column there, and it's called Is There a Book in This? And of course, it turned out there was. This is the book. And they're short stories about gay life in New York, and I took 5 of them from the magazine, the 5 best, and I wrote some new longer ones and made a cycle of stories about a group of people, all friends, and the different things that happen to them as they, make their way through, let's say, the last 10 years of gay life in New York.
So it's fiction?
Yes, entirely.
Not a series of novels about people, in essence?
I think they're very naturalistic, and I think a lot of people who read the book will find people they know, if not themselves, more or less brought forth in them. But on the other hand, there's a touch of fantasy at the end, because I wrote a story about a man who makes a Faustian pact with the devil, that he's constantly changing in any form at all. The question is, if you could look like anything you wanted to look like, every feature at your disposal, how different would your life be, if it would be different at all? It's something that I think has fascinated everyone. And so other than that, the book is it's set in day-to-day New York.
And that's something that we'll get into, because the listeners differ. And I don't know if the Scotto haters have tuned in tonight, because her name was in all the papers, and maybe they're dodging the show. But Scotto haters, if you're out there, he's ready to take you on. And he's ready to put forward what he finds compelling reasons why Renata should be revered.
Listen, I think the most compelling reason of all, Divine Scotto will reveal to us herself in this performance of Straniero. We can listen and judge for ourselves.
Let's forge ahead.
Do you
feel Renata is anything but divine? Say so. Ethan Mordden is ready to give battle. The results could be illuminating. The numbers here, too. The Pavarotti name is purposefully omitted, even in the listings. Yet she claims that, without naming him, that he showed days late in San Francisco for their Giocondas. More, he demanded a rehearsal in his apartment, and he was unprepared. He took inappropriate solo bows. The San Francisco Opera told her that this is his theater. He can do what he wants. In 1969, she added, Pavarotti didn't know the Lombardi music. He was disoriented. The chorus was in tears of laughter. He admitted he didn't know the music. She calls him that tenor. Is this why she sings with Domingo but not with Lucianissimo? Does anyone know what the status of their relationship is now? If you do, call in once we've got music playing. Some more listener comments. Mark French had said, Ethan Mordden, stick it to the Scotto haters. Scotto will be missed when Adriana is filled by Leona Mitchell. Scotto didn't appear for the Mets Mozart. Is she being phased out? Is she phasing herself out? Well...
Okay, first of all, about the feud, let me say this, that if you can't have opera without feuds. It's just the kind of thing that happens. There are a lot of big egos, there's a lot of heavy pressure on these people, and every now and then even someone who isn't a bad character will explode. And of course there are a few people who are bad characters. Nellie Melba treasured her feuds. and a lot of high notes. I think one of the great advisors of young divas always recommended that you pick a very, very important subject to have a feud with, because feuds are what make you famous. I'm sorry that Pavarotti and Scotto have to feud, because when they were both becoming prominent, they seemed to be a very natural couple. In fact, that Lombardi particularly, but also Capuletti, Montecchi, there were a number of operas in which they seemed just beautifully matched somehow, vocally and in person too. And I don't know why that started. I don't know who's at fault if one and not both. But I'll tell you one thing, that feud's going to stick around for a long time, because neither of the two is the kind that forgives and forgets, and she will never sing with him again. And I think it's a shame, because I think Pavarotti is better suited to her than Domingo. But
why?
I think the voice blends better. I think she brings out the best in him and makes him Pavarotti makes him a more distinctive artist, whereas Domingo, I find, marvelous musician though he be, and though it certainly has one of the great instruments, is pretty much the same person in role after role after role. And I don't think that's true of Pavarotti when he's at his best. And I think he's at his best, at least used to be, when he sang with Divine Renata.
Domingo has said of himself that he's a Spanish tenor, and that the fault of Spanish tenors is velvet, and that Spanish tenors should cultivate velvet, which is what he does, adding that Italians, some of them are able to cultivate squillo, ring, ping, and presumably that in part is what Pavarotti has to offer. Now Scotto too has a rather focused voice, and possibly that's why the voices go together.
I don't know exactly when the end will come, but obviously she's been singing for a long time, and it's going to come soon. And the voice has deteriorated very badly because of the larger roles that she took on, roles larger than I think her natural Fach warrants.
What do you mean by Fach?
Fach is vocal category. It's a shorter way of saying the same thing. It's in opera singers often use it, but I guess no one else does. Of course, it's just a plain German word. It means genre, basically.
Yeah. I agree when you say ETHAN MORDDEN. In the end, Scotto brought vitality to the scene and created her unique stardom. She is chosen above all her roles. This is essential, for if roles don't define the voice, they can define the reputation, the profile. You champion Renata Scotto, declaring of her that she is perhaps the last of the true divas, actually, I messed the quote up. You say, perhaps the last of the true divas actually penetrated one of the world's grandest companies and has reigned as house soprano despite a militant faction oved to destroy or at least despise her. You call her by Fach, a combination of Zinka Milanov and Magda Olivero. And you ask, who cares for tradition today? And answer, Renata Scotto, adding, above all, she is the mistress of the traditions with a grasp on authenticity. I'm quoting from Demented here. Now, I don't mean to cast myself in the role of the anti-Scotto, but she herself said on the Cavett show that she wants to reform tradition by cleansing verismo of excess and abstaining, or at least abstaining largely, I think she may have modified the view, abstaining from chest voice. You seem to be an upholder of tradition. You claim that she is an upholder specifically of the verismo tradition. How do you reconcile?
We're using the word in two different meanings, she and I. By tradition, I think she means Mahler's Traditionis Schlamperei, that is sloppy, careless, do the performance that you heard other people doing the week before, and that's how all these sloppy accretions come in. Whereas I mean tradition, going back to the source. In other words, not the traditional norma that you get, but the norma that we presume Bellini had in mind, a cleaner, stylistically pure norma, as opposed to, let's say, a verismoized norma, which we got, for example, with, what's the name of that extremely dramatic soprano who made the complete recording?
Cigna,
right. That's a completely, to me, ramshackle norma. It has no Bellinian style at all. It is just a big dramatic soprano, doing her best to she has the character down, but doing her best to fit the music. I don't want to get sidetracked, though. What I mean is that when Scotto says she's trying to reform tradition, she means she's trying to reform sloppy habits. When I say she's mistress of the traditions, I mean that she knows Bellinian style, she knows Verismo style. She can give us these operas pure as they were meant to sound, when her voice, of course, fits the role.
I don't have a sample of her Norma here. I'm not the anti-Scotto, far from it, as I've said on earlier broadcasts. However, for example, in that very same Dick Cavett appearance, she sang some Bellini and demonstrated a bit of Casta Diva, mistaking the acciaccature for appoggiature, putting them on the beat, lengthening them, accenting them. Well, case could be made for putting them on the beat, but not lengthening and accenting them, throwing askew the phrase structure. Regarding tradition, just whose excesses do you think, ETHAN MORDDEN, she had in mind? Magda Olivero's?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would hope not, because Olivero to me seems also a great mistress of it. She is stylistically very right in, well, not necessarily when she sings Janacek, but certainly when she, she sings Tosca or Adriana, and then of course we have the composer's own stamp of approval on her, Adriana. I think perhaps. I think...
Wait, let me pin you down a bit. Do you mind terribly?
Sure, no.
Yeah. On the subject of Magda, you speak of her bizarrely antique style, artificial but extremely committed. And then in Demented, page 114, you say something that had to be climbing the walls. It's no accident that Adriana was the great role of Magda Olivero, for here was a diva of the oldest school, calculated in her tricks, yet mesmerizing in the way she brought them off. She habitually would hold and swell the G just before the first aria's final A-flat to Olympic proportions. She would draw silly pictures in the air with her hands during romantic interlude for orchestra in Act 2, her smile endearingly batty, as if all her teeth were about to fall out. At the end of Act 3, when a powerful rival has just insulted her in public, she would crumple to the floor, but so slowly that one strained one's eyes to see if she would quite make it. And she sang part of the death act, lying upside down on some piece of furniture, just to demonstrate that it could be done. None of this, no doubt, is high art or good taste, but all of it was tremendously exciting. The eventual discovery that Olivero performed the swelling crescendo, the finger mime, the crumple, and the upside-down position at least once in every opera she appeared in did not efface the bravura. Olivero simply sang every role as if it were great, and at least in Adriana Lecouvreur, as you just said, as she told Bob Conley, a frequent guest here, she held the composer's patent. Chilea declared her ultimate in the part. And then you criticized her for Yenufa. Well, what I've been maintaining here across the years is that Olivero is not a mere mistress of effects. I've argued to the dismay of most of the listenership that the world, the critics in particular, you call them jerko critics, mistake Carlo Bergonzi's bag of vocal tricks, his vocal effects, for artistry, for musicality, the diminuendi, the crescendi, his dynamic control. It's marvelous, but according to me, often it's not integral to the phrasing. He simply will introduce it and create some marvelous effects, but I feel the phrasing doesn't go here. Well, I don't mean to belabor my position there, nor do I mean at the moment to make a target of myself for the listeners' spleens, if spleens can take targets, on the subject of Bergonzi. But on the subject of Magda, why do you hold that what she does is mere effect.
Well, no, when I say tricks and effects, I don't mean that her singing is nothing but a succession of these stunts, as if she was sitting in front of a control panel working buttons. I think some of them are definitely tricks. For example, the silly pictures in the air. It's a pantomime that she does, usually during some reflective moment when the orchestra is, playing some theme. And her hand, well, of course, I'm on radio, so I won't even bother to do it. No one can see. But she does also, in every role I've ever seen her do, she does, at one point or another, find a piece of furniture and sit upside down on it and sing. And, the first time I saw it I guess it was Adriana, I think that was the first time I saw it, I thought, that is not only amazing, it's beautiful. I mean, you have to remember, too, that we're talking about a soprano who is a stupendous singer. So, if she were nothing but a stunt woman in opera, I would say it's fun, but it's silly. But that's not the case. She is an amazing singer. I played the relay of the Jenufa that she did. Now, Jenufa, she is not in style, and this is at La Scala with Bumbry in, I think, 74. She sings it as if it were Verismo, and it's not correct. They were doing it in Italian, too. But I played the end of the Kostelnichka's little solo just before she goes in to take the Jenufa's little bastard and kill it. And at the end of this aria, there's a line in which she's a very prideful woman, and she foresees the people of the town, if the news gets out, pointing at her and saying, there goes Kostelnichka, and they're laughing at her. And the line goes up to B natural, B flat, A, and A flat. And I have never heard anyone but Olivero not just attempt, but successfully sing the entire phrase in chest voice, virtually. It's unbelievable.
I find it incredible that Magda would have done that. She's always used chest voice sparingly.
I'm exaggerating. I just mean that she really gets the most